There is something sacred about dirt. I don't mean the stuff you sweep off your kitchen floor. I mean the soil that's been under your family's fingernails for 4 generations. The 2,000 acres of rolling Kentucky bluegrass and hardwood timber that my great-grandfather bought with nothing but a handshake and a sack of cash back when this county was just a blank spot on a map. They say you can't take it with you when you go, but my dad, Old Man Miller, sure tried to stay as close to it as he could until his dying breath, leaving me, his only son, to inherit not just the land, but the legacy of the Miller Dairy Farm. See, inheriting a farm isn't like inheriting a watch. You inherit the 4 a.m. wake-up calls, the vet bills, the smell of silage that never quite washes out of your clothes, and the responsibility to keep it all running. But what nobody told me I was inheriting was a war with a group of people who decided that my ancestral land was actually just an ugly stain on their perfect suburban view. It started about 5 years ago, right before Dad passed. He'd sold off a 50-acre strip on the far south side to a developer to pay off some heavy machinery debts. At the time, it seemed smart. But that developer threw up a gated community called the Gilded Meadows, a collection of cookie-cutter McMansions that all looked like they were made out of cardboard and hubris. And with the houses came the inevitable infection, the homeowners association. I didn't think much of them at first. I was busy running a 2,000-head dairy operation. I was studying economics by day and milking cows by night. But shortly after I moved into the main farmhouse full-time to take care of my grieving mother, the letters started arriving. The first one was almost funny. It was a citation for unauthorized livestock. I stood on my porch, looking at a herd of Holsteins that had been grazing on that hill since before the HOA president was even born, and I just laughed. I crumpled it up and tossed it in the burn barrel. I figured it was a clerical error, a joke. I mean, my property line is clearly marked with barbed wire and centuries-old oak trees. I am not in their HOA. I am the reason their HOA has a rustic view. But then the letters kept coming. Improper lawn height. Non-compliant barn color. Noise violation, rooster. The fine started at $50 and ramped up to $500 a pop. They weren't just asking for compliance. They were demanding I pay a retroactive membership fee of $20,000 to bring my parcel into the fold. I ignored them. That was my mistake. I thought ignoring a bully would make them go away. But these weren't schoolyard bullies. These were bored, power-hungry suburbanites with a budget. Things went from annoying to dangerous on a Tuesday. I was out checking the fence line when I found a pile of raw hamburger meat sitting just inside my gate. My sheepdog, Buster, was sniffing at it. My heart stopped. I dove for him, tackling the dog just before he took a bite. The meat smelled like sweet almonds, cyanide, or rat poison. They were trying to kill my dog. The rage that filled me wasn't hot. It was cold. It was the kind of anger that makes your hands steady. I installed cameras that week, hidden in the birdhouses and the old fence posts. I upgraded the gate to a heavy steel-reinforced beast. But the HOA, led by a man named Julian Thorne, a guy who wore suits that cost more than my tractor, was just getting started. A week later, my wife came running into the barn, screaming that one of the prize heifers was choking. I ran out to the pasture and found the cow hacking, foaming at the mouth. I managed to reach down her throat and pull out a wad of something. It wasn't grass. It was plastic. Thousands of shredded plastic candy wrappers had been scattered into the clover. Someone had hopped the fence and salted the earth with plastic, knowing the cows would eat it and choke. We saved the cow, barely. But as I stood there in the mud, holding that wad of plastic, I looked toward the Gilded Meadows, and I saw a drone hovering just above the tree line, watching. I called the sheriff. This is where you learn that small-town politics is a dirty game. The sheriff, a guy my dad used to fish with, wouldn't even file a report. "Look, son," he said, shifting his weight uncomfortably. "Julian Thorne donates a lot to the policeman's ball. Unless you catch him red-handed, it's just wind. Maybe you should just pay the fines and make peace." Make peace? They tried to kill my livestock. They tried to kill my dog. A few days later, Thorne showed up at my front door. He didn't knock. He just stood there with a clipboard, flanked by 2 guys who looked like budget security guards. "Mr. Miller," Thorne said, his voice dripping with that fake neighborly syrupy tone. "We need to talk about the eyesore that is your operation. The fines have accumulated to roughly half the assessed value of your frontage. We're willing to forgive the debt if you sign over the deed to the first 20 acres for our new community park. I looked at him. Get off my porch, Julian. You don't want to play hardball, son. He smiled, and it was the smile of a shark. Plastic wrappers are just the beginning. It would be a shame if that old barn went up in smoke. He turned to leave, but as he walked down the steps, he stopped to kick my mother's potted geraniums over. That was the moment. I knew I couldn't just defend. I had to attack. But I couldn't do it with a tractor. I needed to do it with paper. I hired a private investigator, a guy from the city who didn't care about local politics. I told him to dig into the HOA's finances, into Thorne's background, into everything. While he dug, I baited the trap. I started a massive, noisy renovation on the front gate. I knew it would drive them crazy. I had dump trucks coming in and out at 6 a.m. I had jackhammers going. And sure enough, Thorne couldn't resist. He sent the police to shut me down for illegal construction. The deputies rolled up, lights flashing, looking smug. Shut it down, Miller. No permits. I calmly pulled a laminated document out of my back pocket. It was a signed authorization from the State Agricultural Board, bypassing all local zoning because my farm was designated a heritage food production site. The state trumps the county. The deputies looked at the paper, looked at Thorne, and had to walk away. Thorne turned purple. The next day, the vandalism started. They spray-painted my new wall with bright red graffiti. Move. Trash. But this time I was ready. My new cameras caught everything. Not just the act, but Thorne himself directing 2 teenagers on where to spray. But the climax, the moment that still haunts my nightmares, happened 2 nights later. I was in the kitchen with my mother. The gate was still open because the concrete was curing. The front door burst open. It wasn't the police. It was Thorne, and he was unhinged. He was drunk on power and whiskey. He stumbled into my foyer, waving a hunting knife. I am not losing my property value because of you, he screamed. He grabbed the nearest living thing, which happened to be a baby goat we were bottle feeding in the kitchen because it had been rejected by its mother. He grabbed the kid by the scruff, pressing the knife against the little animal's throat. You sign the papers, Miller. You sign them now, or I start carving. I froze. The man was psychotic. If I rushed him, he'd slice the goat, or maybe me. Julian, put the knife down, I said, my hands up. Sign it, he roared, stepping forward, the knife trembling. That's when I heard the distinct clack-clack of a lever-action rifle being racked. Thorne froze. I looked past him. My mother, 70 years old, 5'0", was standing at the top of the stairs holding my daddy's old Winchester .30-30. She had it leveled right at Thorne's left eye. Let the goat go, she said. Her voice wasn't shaking. Or I will paint this foyer with your brains, Julian. Thorne dropped the goat. He dropped the knife. He backed out of that door so fast he tripped over his own feet. We locked the door. My mom lowered the rifle, looked at me, and winked. Good thing he didn't know the firing pin on this thing broke in 1998. That was the end of the fear. The next morning, I handed everything to the state police, not the local sheriff. The video of the vandalism, the footage of the home invasion, and the PI's report. Oh, the report. It turned out Thorne and the HOA board had been embezzling thousands. They were fining residents and pocketing the cash. They were evading taxes. They were bribing the local sheriff. The raid was beautiful. State troopers swarmed the Gilded Meadows. Thorne was arrested for assault with a deadly weapon, extortion, and fraud. Half the board went down with him. The HOA was dissolved by a court order due to criminal enterprise. Now, when I sit on my porch and look out at my cows grazing on the green grass, I don't see enemies. I see peace. And occasionally, I see a neighbor from the subdivision wave at me. I wave back. Because they know, and I know, you don't mess with a farmer. We feed you, but we also know how to take out the trash. Speaking of people who think they're smarter than everyone else, let me tell you about a different kind of arrogance. This isn't about land. It's about respect. And burgers. A few years back, I was managing a burger barn right outside a major military base. Let's call it Fort Bragg. If you know anything about military towns, you know they are magnets for 2 things: young soldiers with disposable income and scammers trying to separate them from it. I was visiting the old shop recently with my brother-in-law, Sarge. Sarge is a career military man, built like a tank and has 0 patience for stupidity. We were grabbing some fries, catching up with an old buddy of mine, Dave, who was running the shift. It was a slow Tuesday. We're eating, laughing about the old days, when the phone rings. The cashier, a new kid who looked terrified of his own shadow, answers it. He listens for a second, goes pale, and brings the phone to Dave. "Boss," the kid whispers, "it's a guy?" He says he's from corporate. He says he's got a delivery of gift cards, but he needs a cash deposit right now, or he's driving off. Dave sighs. It's the classic urgent delivery scam. They call, claim to be a vendor, demand cash, and hope a panicked manager meets them in the parking lot. Dave looks at me, then at Sarge, and a wicked grin spreads across his face. He hands me the phone. "You want to take this?" I grab the receiver. I put on my best panicked employee voice. "Hello? Sir? Oh, thank God. Please don't leave. We need those cards." The scammer on the other line, sounding aggressive, says, "Listen, I don't have time for this. I'm in the gray van. Bring $200 to the curb in 5 minutes, or I'm marking this as a refusal of delivery." "Sir, I can't leave the store," I stammered. "But, look, are you near the north gate of the base? My district manager is actually meeting someone there. He has the petty cash box. He can pay you." The scammer pauses. He sees dollar signs. "Fine. North gate. 5 minutes. What's his name?" Now, I had a split second to make a choice. I could have said John Smith. I could have said David Jones. But I looked at Sarge, and the spirit of juvenile comedy possessed me. "His name," I said with total conviction, "is Hugh. Hugh Janis." "Hugh Janis?" the scammer repeats. "Yeah, he's a big guy. Can't miss him. Just tell the gate guards you're there to see Hugh Janis and that you have a package for him. They'll let you right in." "Fine, click." We hung up. The entire kitchen staff was biting their knuckles trying not to laugh. Sarge, however, pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the MPs at the gate. This is going to be good." Sarge calls the gate. He knows the guy's on duty. "Hey, Corporal." "Yeah. Listen, you've got a gray van incoming. The driver is likely going to claim he has authorization to enter to meet a civilian. Yeah, he's trying to scam a local business. I think he needs a random vehicle inspection that lasts about 3 hours." We ran, literally ran, out the back door and drove Sarge's truck to a parking lot across the street from the north gate to watch the show. Sure enough, the gray van pulls up. We see the driver arguing with the stone-faced MPs. We see the driver pointing at his phone, probably screaming, "But Hugh Janis sent me." The best part? Trying to enter a military installation under false pretenses is a federal offense. It's not a joke. We watched as the MPs didn't just turn him around. They swarmed the vehicle. Dogs came out. Mirrors went under the chassis. The driver was pulled out, handcuffed, and sat on the curb. I don't know how much time he served, or if he just paid a massive fine, but I know one thing. He definitely met a version of the law that day, and it wasn't Hugh Janis. It was the United States Army, and they have zero sense of humor about unauthorized deliveries. But you know, sometimes you can't call the MPs. Sometimes the enemy is right on the other side of your drywall, and the only weapon you have is patience. Agonizing, soul-crushing patience. My name is Sarah, and I live in a row house in a rainy suburb of Seattle. The walls here are thin, but for years, it was fine. Then, the Millers moved in next door. The Millers were a family of 6 who believed that volume was a substitute for personality. They had 4 kids who were essentially feral, a dog that barked at oxygen, and a sound system that could restart a stopped heart. It started with the bass. That thump-thump-thump that vibrates through your floorboards and settles in your teeth. I was in grad school, trying to write a thesis. I asked them nicely, "Hey, could you turn it down?" They smiled, said sure, and 10 minutes later, it was louder. Then the lockdown hit. Suddenly, I was trapped. My father, who lives with me, has a heart condition. My sister was pregnant. We couldn't leave. And the Millers? They decided that lockdown was just a suggestion. They threw parties. Every single night. I'm talking 20 people in the backyard, screaming, drinking, music blasting until 4 a.m. I called the police. The police would come, the music would stop for 5 minutes, and then start again the second the cruiser left. But the breaking point, the moment that turned me from a frustrated neighbor into a vengeful force of nature, happened on a Wednesday. I had applied to the police academy. This was my dream. I had spent 6 months training, studying, passing background checks. I had one final interview. It was a Zoom call, scheduled for 10 a.m. It was the only thing standing between me and my badge. At 8 a.m., the music started. Heavy metal. Screaming. I went next door. I knocked. The mother, a woman who looked like she started her day with a cigarette and a shot of vodka, answered. Please, I begged. I have the most important interview of my life in 2 hours. Just for today. Can you please keep it down until 1 p.m.? She looked me dead in the eye, took a drag of her cigarette, and said, We're celebrating my son's report card. We do what we want. She slammed the door. I went back home. I set up my laptop in the closet, the quietest place I could find. But at 9:55 a.m., 5 minutes before the call, the volume doubled. They had moved the speakers into the backyard, pointing directly at my window. They were shouting, whooping, clinking bottles. The interview was a disaster. The captain on the screen kept asking, Is that a party? Sarah, we need candidates who can control their environment. I couldn't hear the questions. I was sweating, shouting to be heard. I saw the look of annoyance on the interview panel's faces. They cut the interview short. I got the email 2 hours later. Rejected. At 1:15 p.m., 15 minutes after the rejection email came through, the music stopped. The Millers piled into their car and drove off. They had done it on purpose. They knew. I sat on my floor and cried. But then, I stopped crying. I wiped my face. And I started a log. If the police wouldn't help, and the council wouldn't help, I would become the surveillance state. I bought a decibel meter. I recorded every single infraction. Time, date, volume level. I recorded the license plates of their guests violating lockdown orders. I recorded the drug deals happening over the back fence. I did this for 2 years. 2 years of hell. I compiled a dossier that was 3 inches thick. Then, I found the weak link. The landlord. The Millers didn't own the house. They were renting. I found the owner's contact info, a guy who lived in Florida and had no idea what was happening. I sent him the dossier. I sent him the video files. I sent him the fines the city had issued that he probably never saw. And I sent him a letter from a lawyer friend of mine, suggesting that if the illegal activities on his property continued, he could be liable for facilitating a nuisance house. The eviction notice was served a month later. Watching the Millers pack their trash bags into a rented U-Haul was better than any movie I have ever seen. The mother glared at me as she carried a box of empty liquor bottles to the curb. I stood in my window, holding a cup of coffee, and I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The silence spoke for me. It's been a year. The new neighbors are a quiet couple who garden and go to bed at 9 p.m. I reapplied to the academy, and this time, the interview room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I start next month. So what have we learned? Whether it's an HOA tyrant trying to steal your inheritance, a scammer trying to steal your cash, or a neighbor trying to steal your sanity, the lesson is the same. Bullies thrive on the idea that you are powerless. They bank on you being too polite, too scared, or too tired to fight back. But everyone has a limit. Everyone has that line in the sand. For Caleb, it was a baby goat. For me, it was a fake name. For Sarah, it was a stolen career. I want to know about your line. Have you ever had to go to war with a neighbor? Have you ever had to outsmart a scammer? Or are you currently living in an HOA nightmare and need some advice? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one of them. And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. Sometimes, it's just the sound of a pen signing an eviction notice, or a gate latch clicking shut on land that is, and always will be, yours. Thanks for listening, guys. Stay safe out there.